mean? Picture this. It's an ordinary Tuesday evening. You finish dinner, maybe cleaned a dish or two, and you sit down on the couch. You pick up your phone. Not for any real reason, just to check, just to glance. A notification maybe, a message. You open one app, then another. A short video plays, then another, then another. Someone's arguing about something. Someone's ranking something. A stranger is telling a story about a thing that happened to another stranger. You scroll, you tap, you scroll again. And then you look up. An hour is gone. Not spent, not invested, not even really enjoyed. Just gone. Like a coin that slipped through a hole in your pocket. You didn't feel it leave. You couldn't even tell someone what you saw in that hour if they asked. It just vanished into the ether of blue light and infinite content. Now, here's where most conversations about social media stop. They say, it wastes your time. They trot out the statistics. The average person spends 2.5 hours a day on social platforms. That's roughly 38 full days a year. Over a lifetime, it adds up to years. Literal years of your finite existence, spent watching other people's curated moments, reading arguments between strangers, and double-tapping photos you'll never remember. And all of that is true. But it's also the shallow version of the problem. Because social media doesn't just steal your minutes. It compresses the depth, the presence, and the felt meaning of your life itself. It does something far more insidious than taking time from you. It changes what time feels like. It changes what you feel like inside of time. And by doing so, it quietly, invisibly, almost imperceptibly shortens your life. Not biologically, experientially. It makes the life you're living feel smaller, thinner, less real. And it does this by design. Let me explain. To understand what's actually happening when you scroll, you have to understand the architecture underneath the screen. Social media platforms are not neutral tools. They are not digital parks where people happen to gather. They are engineered systems, built, tested, refined, and optimized for one specific outcome: the capture and retention of human attention. That is the product, not connection, not information, not entertainment. Your attention. Harvested, packaged, and sold. And the mechanism they use to harvest it is as old as addiction itself. It's called a dopamine-driven feedback loop. Dopamine, despite what pop psychology often suggests, is not the pleasure chemical. It's more accurately described as the chemical of anticipation. It doesn't surge when you get the reward. It surges when you expect one might be coming. It's the neurological engine of wanting, not having. And this distinction matters enormously. Because social media platforms have been designed around what behavioral psychologists call variable reward systems. This is the same principle that makes slot machines so addictive. You pull the lever, or in this case, you pull down the screen to refresh, and you don't know what you're going to get. Sometimes it's something interesting, sometimes it's nothing. Sometimes it's a comment from someone you care about. Sometimes it's outrage. Sometimes it's a video so funny you save it. Sometimes it's just noise. But the inconsistency is the point. The unpredictability is the hook. Your brain doesn't become addicted to the content. It becomes addicted to the possibility of content. Each scroll is a tiny pull of a lever. Each refresh is a miniature gamble, and your dopamine system fires not at the result, but at the act of checking, the act of anticipating, the act of reaching for that next unknown thing. This is why you keep scrolling, even when nothing is satisfying you. This is why you pick up your phone even when you just put it down. This is why, after an hour of browsing, you feel drained, slightly hollow, vaguely restless, but still reluctant to stop. The loop doesn't need you to enjoy it. It just needs you to continue. Asa Raskin, the designer who invented Infinite Scroll, once admitted the feature was designed to eliminate the natural stopping cues that used to exist in digital experiences. Think about that. There used to be a bottom of the page, a last post, a moment where the experience said, "You've reached the end." Those moments were removed deliberately so that nothing would ever signal your brain to stop. The feed has no flaw. It just keeps going. And so do you. Former Facebook executive Chamath Palihapitiya put it even more starkly. He said these systems were designed to exploit human psychology, and he admitted feeling tremendous guilt for his role in building them. These aren't conspiracy theories or fringe critiques. These are the people who built the machine, telling you openly what the machine does. It captures your attention through a loop of anticipation, delivers just enough intermittent reward to keep you pulling the lever, and removes every possible cue that might help you stop. And while this loop runs, something is happening to your mind that you might not notice until the damage has accumulated over months and years. There's a concept in cognitive science called attention fragmentation. It describes what happens when your focus is repeatedly broken into smaller and smaller intervals. Every time you switch from one piece of content to another, from a video to a meme, to a headline, to a comment, to a notification, your brain doesn't just shift focus, it fractures it. Each switch carries what researchers call a switching cost, a brief but real period where your brain is partially still processing the last thing while trying to orient to the next. Now, this might seem minor for a single switch, but social media doesn't ask you to switch once. It asks you to switch hundreds, sometimes thousands, of times in a single session. Scroll, new image, scroll, new text, scroll, new face, scroll, new emotion, scroll, new opinion. Every few seconds, a completely new stimulus demands your brain's attention. The result is a state of chronic cognitive overload. Your working memory, the mental workspace where thinking, reflecting, and creating actually happen, becomes perpetually cluttered. It never gets a chance to clear. It never gets a chance to settle. And over time, this has a measurable effect on your ability to think deeply, to sustain focus on a single idea, to sit with a problem long enough to actually solve it. Gloria Mark, a researcher at the University of California, Irvine, has spent years studying attention in the digital age. Her research shows that the average time a person spends on a single screen before switching has decreased dramatically, from around 2.5 minutes in 2004 to roughly 47 seconds in recent studies. 47 seconds. That's the average depth of engagement before the mind lunges towards the next thing. And here's what's quietly terrifying about this. Deep focus is not just useful for work or productivity. It's the foundation of meaning itself. Think about any experience in your life that felt truly rich, a conversation that moved you, a walk where you noticed everything, a project where you lost track of time in the best possible way. What all those moments share is sustained attention. They required your mind to be in one place, fully, for an extended period. That is where meaning lives. Not in breadth, but in depth. Not in how many things you experience, but in how deeply you experience them. Social media trains the exact opposite. It trains your attention to be shallow, restless, and perpetually dissatisfied. It teaches your brain that if something doesn't stimulate you in 3 seconds, you should move on. And then it provides an infinite library of 3-second stimulations to ensure you never have to sit with anything long enough for it to actually matter. The philosopher Blaise Pascal once wrote, all of humanity's problems stem from man's inability to sit quietly in a room alone. That was the 17th century. He could not have imagined what we've built. We've created a machine that ensures you never have to sit quietly again. And we carry it in our pockets, and we sleep with it next to our heads. Now let me take you somewhere deeper, because beyond the attention and the dopamine and the cognitive overload, there is another cost. One that is harder to measure, but perhaps more important than all the rest. Social media changes the way you experience time, not clock time, felt time, subjective time, the time that makes up the texture of your actual life. There's a well-known phenomenon in psychology. When you do something new, something challenging, something that requires real engagement, time feels like it slows down. A week-long trip to an unfamiliar place feels longer than a month of routine. A deep conversation lasts 30 minutes, but feels like it contained hours. This is because your brain is actively encoding rich, detailed memories. And when you look back on those memories, the sheer density of them makes the period feel expansive, full, long in the best sense. But the opposite is also true. When your days are filled with repetitive, low engagement, shallow stimulation, when you spend hours doing something that requires almost no active processing, your brain doesn't bother to encode detailed memories. There's nothing worth remembering. Nothing distinctive happened. And so when you look back on a week, a month, a year, it feels compressed, thin, as though it barely happened. This is the time illusion at the heart of social media use. While you're scrolling, time seems to disappear. An hour feels like minutes. This is because the rapid, frictionless stimulation puts your brain in a passive, almost trance-like state. You're not asleep, but you're not fully awake either. You're in a twilight zone of consciousness, present enough to consume, but not present enough to create lasting memory. And then you stop, and you realize the hour is gone, and you can't account for it. You can't reconstruct it. If someone asked you to narrate what you experienced in that hour, you'd struggle to fill 60 seconds. Now, multiply that by every day, every week, every year. What you get is a life that paradoxically feels both fast and empty. The days blur together. The months feel indistinguishable. You reach December and think, where did this year go? And the answer, the real answer, is that it went into the scroll. It was consumed by an endless procession of micro-moments, none of which was substantial enough to leave a mark. The neuroscientist David Eagleman has written extensively about how time perception is linked to novelty and engagement. The more new and meaningful experiences you have, the longer your life feels when you look back on it. The fewer you have, the shorter it feels. By this measure, social media doesn't just waste time, it collapses it. It makes years feel like weeks. It takes a life of ordinary length and makes it feel frighteningly short. And this brings us to the part of the problem that no one wants to look at directly: the existential cost. What does it mean when an entire generation, multiple generations actually, gradually loses the ability to be alone with their thoughts? Think about what happens when you wait in line now, when you sit in a waiting room, when there's a pause in a conversation, when you're lying in bed and sleep hasn't come yet. The phone comes out, instantly, reflexively. Not because you decided to use it, but because the silence became uncomfortable. The emptiness felt threatening, and so you filled it with content, with stimulation, with other people's thoughts, because your own had become unbearable. This is not a small thing. Boredom, as it turns out, is one of the most psychologically important states a human being can experience. When you're bored, your brain enters what neuroscientists call the default mode network, a state of internal reflection, mind-wandering, and self-referential thought. This is where you process your experiences, where you integrate your emotions, where you make sense of who you are and what you want. This is where creativity is born, not from stimulation, but from the absence of it, from the space between inputs. Every great idea, every personal revelation, every moment of genuine self-understanding, these tend to emerge not when you're consuming, but when you're sitting in that uncomfortable gap, allowing your mind to wander and work through its own material. Social media fills that gap. Every time, preemptively. It takes the space where self-knowledge used to grow and fills it with noise. And over time, you don't just lose the ability to tolerate boredom, you lose access to yourself. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard, writing almost 200 years ago, warned that the constant pursuit of diversion would become the defining sickness of the modern age. He called it a way to avoid the anxiety of existence, the weight of freedom, the terror and beauty of being a finite creature in an infinite world. He said that most people would rather be busy than be real. And what is social media, at its core, but the ultimate tool of busyness? The ultimate diversion, the perfect machine for ensuring that you never have to sit with the fundamental questions of your own life long enough to actually answer them. Who am I? What do I want? What am I afraid of? What would I do if I weren't performing for anyone? These questions don't arise in the scroll, they arise in the silence. And social media has waged a quiet war on silence. There's a haunting observation that the writer David Foster Wallace once made. He said that the great danger of our age is not that we'll be oppressed by some external force, but that we'll amuse ourselves into a kind of spiritual death. Not the death of the body, but the death of the inner life. The slow, comfortable erosion of everything that makes a human being a person rather than a consumer. He was paraphrasing Neil Postman, who was paraphrasing Aldous Huxley, and all of them were pointing at the same thing. The possibility that the worst cage is the one you walk into voluntarily, the one that feels like freedom, the one that entertains you so thoroughly that you never notice the walls. And here we are, entertained, endlessly, voluntarily, comfortably, and somehow, despite having more content available than any civilization in human history, we are bored in a way that previous generations would have found incomprehensible. Not bored from lack of stimulation, but bored from an excess of it. Saturated, overfull, but undernourished. Like eating 1,000 calories of sugar and still being hungry. So where does that leave us? You might expect me to say something simple here. Delete your apps. Set a screen time limit. Put your phone in grayscale. Go for a walk. Read a book. There are entire industries built around this kind of advice, and some of it is genuinely useful, but it also misses the deeper point. Because the problem was never really about social media. Social media is a symptom. It's a mirror. It reflects something that was already true about us, our discomfort with stillness, our fear of meaninglessness, our willingness to trade depth for speed, presence for distraction, being for doing. If you deleted every app on your phone tomorrow, the underlying vulnerability would remain. You would find other ways to avoid yourself, other ways to fill the silence, other ways to trade the present moment for something easier, shinier, less demanding. The real battle is not against technology. It is for something far more precious and far more personal. It is for the ownership of your own attention, your own time, your own inner life. Because attention is not just a cognitive resource. It is, in the deeper sense, the substance of your life. Where your attention goes, your life goes. What you attend to becomes your experience. What you ignore ceases to exist for you, not literally, but experientially. If you spend your attention on things that don't matter to you, then your life, the felt, lived, remembered life, will be composed of things that don't matter, and no amount of years will fix that. You can live to 100 and feel as though you barely lived at all. The psychologist William James understood this over a century ago when he wrote, "My experience is what I agree to attend to." That sentence contains everything. Your experience, your life, is not what happens to you. It is what you attend to. It is what you give the irreplaceable currency of your awareness. And every moment you give that currency to a platform designed to extract it from you without giving anything meaningful in return, that moment is not just wasted. It is lost. It is subtracted from the total texture of your existence. This is what it means to say that social media shortens your life. Not that it takes years off your biological clock, though chronic stress, disrupted sleep, and sedentary behavior certainly don't help. But that it takes years off your experiential life. It makes the years you have feel less real, less rich, less yours. It replaces vivid, embodied, present living with a kind of half-life, a dimmed, distracted, second-hand existence where you're always watching, rarely doing, and never quite here. There is no app that can give you back a moment of genuine presence. There is no algorithm that can manufacture meaning. These things come from the same place they have always come from. Sustained attention, honest engagement with what is real, and the willingness to sit in the discomfort of your own unfiltered existence long enough for something true to emerge. The monk Thich Nhat Hanh once said that the most precious gift you can give someone is your attention. But he might have also said, and I think he meant, that the most precious gift you can give yourself is the same thing. Your own attention. Reclaimed, redirected. Given intentionally to the things and people and moments that actually compose a life worth remembering. Because at the end, and there will be an end, you will not look back and wish you had seen more content. You will not mourn the notifications you missed. You will not regret the feeds you didn't scroll. You will think about mornings, about faces, about conversations that changed you, about the way the light looked on a particular afternoon when you happened, for once, to be paying attention. Life is not measured in years. It is measured in moments of awareness, in moments when you were actually, fully, undeniably here. And anything at all, that quietly steals those moments from you, that replaces presence with distraction and depth with noise, and living with watching. That thing, whatever it is shortening your life. Not someday. Right now. The question is whether you'll notice before the hour is gone